He wants it on. He's funny. I'm going to listen to music. Hmm. Mm-mm. I know. Not really. I like the song. No. Nice. cared about you, liked you. Kids seem to like him a lot. I think that'd be swell. I'm not saying one or the other. It's between him and God. I'd be happy if you found your way to God. It's such an uncool, unpopular thing to do. It's such an unpopular, uncool thing to do. But that's right. Get mocked and humiliated, and the setup isn't as mockery and humiliating. Setup is just it's bad, you know. Well, I didn't blame myself for your behavior, which seems pretty simple. I didn't know that'd be so hard to understand. Gee, you. Yes. Jinhura? I remember this one. Right. It's like we thought about it or something. Or we did it? That's disgusting. Well, as long as it's not a hairy. Yikes. Just look at this side. Oh, look at that. I know. Can you make the music a little louder, God? Or in my head louder? I'm good. I like it okay. I don't know what that is. I'll try the Yellow River. Yeah. Listen to some AM Gold 70s, Volume 1. I have like 2 days left on Amazon Music to download music so I can listen to it offline. Eyes look weird. Guess that's alright. Let's try Yellow River. There it goes. Haven't heard it in a while. Christy. I'm listening to a song called Yellow River, and Satanists are saying the Yellow River is significant to them. I don't know where it is. This is Precious and Few. I haven't listened to this in a long time. By Climax. Quiet and blue like the sky. It just wouldn't be fair, 'cause precious and few are the moments we two can share. Baby, it's you. Being with you is a feel just can't bear. And if I just would, 'cause precious and few are the moments we two can share. Not exactly. I will say that. I don't have a paradigm for that. Well, I guess I'll see. Oh, Brandy. Brandy is one of my favorite songs. Brandy, you're a fine girl, what a good wife you would be. But my friend, my lover, my lady is the sea. My eyes look so weird. Excuse me. I look a little better, but I don't know. My left eye looks blue or clear or something. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What is that called? Bad Mary or Sad Mary or what's up? I don't know. What's my ears for? Mm. Probably should have finished that. Hmm. 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 I don't know. She's been it for a long time. 12 years or something. We're talking about Angela Merkel. Um, she's been what do you call it? Chancellor of Germany for a long time. She may not be allowed to run again. I don't know how it works in Germany. That'd be nice if somebody was sane on this planet. It hasn't come up before. During the Iraq War, the second one, the Russian GRU, I'm not sure what it stands for. I think it's their intelligence agency, posted reports what was actually happening in Iraq, on the ground and stuff, and the intel was much better than anything the U.S. News was bringing. So I used to read their updates and stuff, and I don't know, if I posted when I put a web page, one of my links on my web page was Russian GRU reports on Iraq, something. Venix Aviation. I think that's what it's called. Is that wrong? Russian I don't know. Venix Aviation. What was the shit. I could be being all confused. I could be whatever. I think it was called Vennex Aviation. I don't remember the name of the aviation in shit. I remembered in Florida that Daniel Hopsiker did articles on where the pilots supposedly of the hijackers on 911 learned to fly. What's wrong with me remembering? Mm-hmm. Hmm. I think so. I don't know. But I hope I'm not doing this bad, letting Telegram ever. Really? Really? How do I do that? Okay. The verdict was announced? Oh, shit. He was found guilty. Shit. Derek Chauvin was found guilty. I'm getting this on Telegram. Russian news, but I don't know if it's on U.S. news. It should be. See if there's any protests going on or anything. Excuse me. Go to ABC. The verdict is on U.S. News.
I think that was fair. And I think so many of us felt that, and I think that's the core of the emotion here, that it didn't have to be that way and it didn't have to escalate that way. It wasn't about whether George Floyd was a perfect man. It was really about the fact that he was a man and he should have been treated as such. And I think for a lot of people this resonates as sort of a victory in the sense that we need to start regarding people, as people and treating them with humanity and respect. And, for once people saw justice and saw somebody being held into account because of how that was handled. And I think that at the core is what a lot of people will be feeling and talking about tonight. And maybe actually, as Lindsay said, exhaling a little bit tonight, thinking that maybe the system can recognize bad behavior sometimes on the place of law enforcement. So I think that is, David, something that will be resonating and being talked about a lot tonight.
Deborah Roberts with us for our coverage this afternoon, and as Deb points out, the conversation begins in homes across the country, probably right now as we're on the air, now that we've learned the verdict here this afternoon. And as we heard Ken Moten report just moments ago, President Biden reaching out to the family of George Floyd after the verdict was read. We had not heard publicly from the president yet, but we have learned that he has talked with George Floyd's family. I want to bring in our senior congressional correspondent, Rachel Scott, who I believe is at Black Lives Matter Plaza in Washington, D.C. Of course, that was created in the aftermath of what happened to George Floyd in the effort to push for reform and for justice. And Rachel, you heard what Ken Moten said there a moment ago, that this doesn't necessarily end this chapter, that the Floyd family believes that this is the beginning of a conversation, and that the next part of this conversation is how do we make change in this country?
That's exactly right, David. I mean, I'm standing here in Black Lives Matter Plaza, a plaza that now has the words Black Lives Matter printed in bold yellow letters on this block leading up to the White House. But activists, Black people in this country want more than just a symbol. They want change, and they want that to come through legislation. We heard Cecilia Vega talk about police reform in this country being stalled. We saw those conversations about police reform from bipartisan group of lawmakers. Those went nowhere after the death of George Floyd. Those talks sort of resume again, but they want more from this White House. They want more from lawmakers in Congress. Just moments after this verdict was read, I watched one young black man just fall to his knees in tears here, overcome with emotion. I just talked to him. He told me he was out here over the summer as those protests over racial reckoning erupted in this country. He says that he saw himself in George Floyd. And today, David, I'm also thinking about moments that we were on the air during George Floyd's funeral. I remember being out here, and I remember a group of protesters were here, and they started with the name of George
I just
Floyd.
downloaded a Telegram. I believe Paul guided me to. It's based in, the development team is based in Dubai. So,
So many others. And that really struck to the heart of what this movement is about. It is about change.
I don't know. I can always undo it.
That comes out here, people that are gathering here right now, they have stories. They have stories in which they have experienced racial inequality in this country. I remember being out here night after night during the summer, talking to families who brought their children here to have those tough conversations about race in this country, about what it means to be white in America, about what it means to be black in America. But David, every single person that I spoke with said that they wanted change, and that change comes through legislation. Many here today feel like we took one step forward towards that change, David.
Rachel Scott reporting from Black Lives Matter Plaza in Washington. A relatively peaceful scene that she described in great detail, witnessing one young black man who fell to his knees in reaction to the verdict here this afternoon. I know that Good Morning America's Michael Strahan has been watching this unfold this afternoon. Right here along with us, Michael. What do you make of what you've learned here this afternoon? What's your reaction?
Well, David, I appreciate you having me on, and I think my reaction is looking at the verdict, and you feel that it's justified. You feel maybe this is a changing of the tide. Hopefully, you no longer get away with killing a black person, no matter who you are in society, not just as a police officer, but for anyone. And you look at this case, and it definitely, black people in America have been, treated in a different way when it comes to dealing with the police. But this is also about just humanity as a whole. To see this as a human being, it was disturbing. And at the end of it all, I think that you see people celebrating and you see people are happy, but it does not bring George Floyd back. It does not, bring any. Anything. You had Breonna Taylor, you had Philando Castile, you had all these others who did not get the justice that we see here in the case of George Floyd, but you still have the family who still have to suffer through the fact that yes, their verdict is guilty, but yet he will never walk through their door again. But I think, but as a whole, as a black man in this country, and being, as black people in this country, we feel that hopefully this is a changing of the guard, like a change that will show that people of color will be treated with the respect and the dignity of everyone else, and it won't be an afterthought. We won't be surprised when something like this happens and the verdict is guilty. We won't be on the edge of our seat hoping that the verdict is guilty when it's very hard to understand how it couldn't be. So I just think that this is a feeling of hope. But yet, I want everybody to keep in mind that there's still a family that is grieving the loss of a brother, a father, and a son decision in this case, and that hopefully this is something that rings and makes change for the future of the minorities in this country.
Michael Strahan reporting in this afternoon, and Michael making an extraordinarily profound point there, that it is important that we all remember that there is a family at the heart of this case and at this heart of this trial, George Floyd's family, and even though we saw their reaction, that they do believe justice has been served. That is. Here's what he had to say.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Okay.
And some tears right after the verdict was read from that. The immediate change in temperature in Minneapolis, on the streets of Minneapolis, that people exhaled, if you will. That was the word that Lindsay used to describe the moment. I want to bring in Cecilia Vega because, Cecilia, we did learn from Ken Moten that President Biden did reach out to George Floyd's family, and we are aware that this has been a relationship that the president has forged with his family, not just now, not just during this trial, but all the way back to when the country and the world witnessed this video. He went to meet with them in Houston on the eve of that.
Marks later this evening, they say, on the verdict. So clearly that is going to happen at some point later this evening. But this is something that we have heard from this White House and frankly from this president himself. This is not something that he shies away from. The personal grief and the personal tragedy that he has lived in his own life, having lost children, having lost a wife so tragically young, just as he was being sworn in as a senator here in Washington all those years ago. And this is a president who very much governs as an empathetic ear, as someone who connects one-on-one with people, and who does not shy away from to families who are living through such awful tragedies like the one that the George Floyd family has gone through, that one day there will come a time, he hopes for them, that there will be a smile on their face when they remember those loved ones, that smile and those happy memories will overshadow the sad ones. And that is, I'm sure, part of the conversation that he has had with this family. We talked earlier about the controversy, the president weighing in on this verdict before the verdict actually happened, saying that he was praying for the right verdict. I think we know where the president's mind and heart was on what the outcome that he wanted to see, even though the White House wouldn't fill in the blanks. But again, David, we do expect to hear from the president and the vice president at some point sooner than later. And the vice president, I will say, did an interview earlier today where she said that this verdict will not not heal the pain that has existed for generations. And that is a point that we should make here, that my colleagues who have been reporting on this story for going on a year now, that this verdict doesn't end this conversation that needs to keep happening in this country about reform and policing and justice. And I'm certain that that is something the president will hit on today.
Cecilia Vega at the White House. We just learned from Cecilia moments ago that President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris will have comments on this verdict, public comments, in the hours to come from Washington. We do know that the president talked with the family of George Floyd, a relationship that he struck up with them since not long after this tragedy, which takes us back into the months leading up to the election, of course. I want to bring in Nightline anchor Byron Pitts because as we were talking about with Cecilia there, Byron reminds me of part of the case that the prosecution made. That they said that this was, not an anti-police prosecution, that this was about former officer Derek Chauvin, and in trying to make that point, they put up a visual inside the courtroom showing all of the faces of the police witnesses who testified against Derek Chauvin. That was extremely rare to see in a case of alleged police misconduct. We now know that the jury has found him guilty, but extremely rare to see the number of faces and no particular order, although the police chief himself saying that he did not act in accordance with police policy. Very strong words from the police department, and I gather, as Cecilia points out, this is also going to be a conversation that continues and one with political undertones to it, and the president will likely have to thread the needle, essentially, I gather, making a similar case to what we heard from the prosecution, that this isn't an anti-police moment in this country, but that this was about an officer accused of wrongdoing and now found guilty by a jury, a very diverse jury in Minneapolis.
That's right, David. A diverse American jury believed their eyes. And frankly, that's been rare in American history in major moments, that black and white America see the same event and have the same reaction to it. I have a few thoughts, David. I was thinking about what the prosecutor, Jerry Blackwell, said yesterday to your point about law enforcement. He said being a cop in America is about in your custody, in your care, not in your custody, I don't care. So I think this verdict certainly sends a message to law enforcement across this nation about what the public expects of them. I'm also mindful of what Dr. King said in March of 1968. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. I would think for people who were satisfied by today's verdict, that justice found its sweet spot. And David, lastly, I'm mindful of something, though, that one of the demonstrators, protesters said. A woman gathered down there at George Floyd Square said, as we saw the images of people reacting, the woman said the healing work begins. And I think that's worth noting. For all the optimism that many people may feel in this moment, history has shown us for every success there are setbacks. I think about that pivotal moment in American history when Dr. King gave his "I Have a Dream" speech in 1963. 18 days later, though, there was a bombing at a Birmingham church and 4 girls died. So in many ways, this trial was hard. Watching that videotape was hard, but the healing work that woman spoke of, history has shown that is equally hard, if not more difficult. So yes, as Dr. King said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. So perhaps we did find justice today, but there's so much work to be done in police stations, in courtrooms, in corporations across this nation, in homes across this nation. So significant night today, but so much work to come.
Byron Pitts of Nightline. Byron, always great to have you help guide the way here with us as we're on the air. You're watching ABC News Live coverage of the verdict in the trial against former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin. Obviously, a short time ago, found guilty on all 3 counts. Found guilty of second-degree unintentional murder, guilty of third-degree murder, guilty of second-degree manslaughter. As I've been explaining as we go, this trial has been different in many ways because it's playing out in the middle of a pandemic. The judge making the rare decision to live stream the trial, which allowed the country and really the world to watch. Of course, we did not see the jurors, and we do have what we call the pool report from the reporter who was allowed in that room, describing the jurors walking into that room rather stoically, no emotion on their face, extremely serious, describing the former police officer Chauvin, studying them, studying the judge as he read the verdict, and then getting up very calmly as he was handcuffed and then escorted out of that courtroom We heard in the moments right before that the state asking the judge to revoke bail, which we knew they would do if he was found guilty on any of these charges, and of course on all three. And he was guided out of that courtroom. As we mentioned with Dan Abrams earlier in our coverage, he will be sentenced based on the most serious of those three charges. That's in accordance with Minnesota law. He faces potentially decades behind bars. And Dan Abrams suggested that perhaps as part of that sentencing, they will use what the prosecution used in their rebuttal. Basically going back to the 9-year-old girl. There were so many witnesses there that day, but going back to that 9-year-old girl who said she listened in 9 minutes, 29 seconds into that moment. The paramedics then arriving, Derek Chauvin still with his knee to George Floyd's neck, and that 9-year-old girl said she could hear paramedics having to tell Chauvin, get off of him. You know, Byron Pitt's making the point there that this was a diverse jury, that this was an all-American jury, if you will. 6 white jurors, 4 black jurors, and 2 people who describe themselves as multiracial. Perhaps that will offer a unifying message as the country digests the verdict in this case, and as we begin the conversation about what comes next. I wanted to bring in Terry Austin of the Law and Crime Network, because Terry, in addition to the jury, we heard the defense make that case in the last 24 hours, and they did this throughout the trial. They tried to characterize the bystanders there as potential threats to Derek Chauvin, certainly at the very least a distraction to Derek Chauvin. And then we heard that rebuttal from the prosecution, and I'm curious if you think that rebuttal had any impact, because obviously they have now decided the way they have. They've agreed with the prosecution, but there was that point that he made when he said those bystanders, those witnesses, a threat. And he basically said, come on, I mean, you saw them. And he pointed out to the jury that you met almost all of those bystanders who had come in as witnesses. And Terry, we all witnessed, as the nation watched this trial, very emotional testimony from each one of them about what they witnessed, and the faces of those witnesses represented all different backgrounds in this country.
There is no question that on rebuttal, when Jerry Blackwell mentioned the fact that that crowd was there with the jury, that crowd took the pictures, they witnessed what happened, and they told you as a jury that this was wrong, that this should not be happening. We have a 9-year-old girl who said, just get up off of him. I definitely think that was very impactful, and frankly, I believe that those witnesses who are hearing this verdict are happy. They understand that they did their part in this process. They came forward, they told the truth, they were listened to, and I think it's going to affect the entire judicial system, and it will have an incredible impact on the world. Here we are seeing finally that individuals are being held individually accountable for their actions, not just passing laws, and those are important, not just having police reform, and that is important, but actually having a police officer being held personally accountable for having used excessive force against an individual of color. I think finally we can sigh a breath of relief, and I think finally we are at a tipping point. And I'll add one last thing. I am here in Harlem. When the guilty verdict came out on all 3 counts, you could hear all of Harlem cheering, and that is only the second time that I've heard that. The first time was when we saw Joe Biden get voted for president, and so I think it is astronomical that this is happening, and I think the world is reacting.
Terry, stick with us here. I just have a note for our audience. For those of you watching, we know that many of our stations might pull away for their 6 o'clock local news. For the rest of the country, we will be staying on with our live coverage, ABC's live coverage of the verdict in the trial of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin, found guilty.
I'm reading about
today on
George
all
Floyd.
charges. And for those of you who will be going to look,
It's significant that he went to.
In the meantime, Terry, I want to come back to you because I wanted your reaction to something we've just learned. Darnella Frazier, who of course captured that video. That was the
Florida State College, I think it's called. It's a community college, I think. It exists in 4 counties in Florida.
Was of course the 9 minutes 29 seconds that they were able to play of that video, more than 8 minutes of it in their opening statement. Darnella Frazier, who captured that video, Terry, this is what she just sent out in a tweet, I believe. She said, "I just cried so hard this last hour. My heart was beating
There
so
are
fast.
28 colleges in the Florida state
through the
system.
roof, but to know guilty on all three charges."
Anne went to the University of Florida in
Thank you.
Gainesville.
And we heard her
Paul Burrell
testify,
went to Florida State.
on that witness stand that
I
she
think it's
has
in
felt
Tallahassee.
guilty, since that Memorial Day in South Minneapolis, that she was not able to do more. And today, as you heard right there, she is so grateful, she says, for guilty on all three charges.
And I think the other witnesses who came forward will also feel some sort of relief. Obviously, we cannot bring George Floyd back, but I think for the other witnesses who said that they wish that they had done more, obviously the fact that they came in and they testified, they made a difference, and the jury heard them loudly and clearly. And it was very smart on the part of the prosecution to bring that back in to his closing statement, because the jury really needed to hear that. And I'm grateful that Darnell Frazier,
When he was 2,
learned
Floyd's
that this
parents
was a
separated.
guilty verdict on all counts, and that she's relieved.
Hold
And
on.
I'm hoping and thinking that the others in that crowd will have some sense of relief, and that the family also will have some sense of relief. Obviously, they'll never be the same again.
When he was 2, after Floyd's parents separated, his mother moved the children to CUNY Homes public housing known as Bricks in Houston's 3rd Ward, a historically African American neighborhood. John Lansberg might be reacting. I called Kansas City Public Schools, 2 or 3 of them, to speak with the principals or something, to report to them that John was torturing little black children in the Kansas City public school system. And John is reacting now, so CUNY Homes public housing known as Bricks in Houston's 3rd Ward. Houston is a hot number town. Floyd was called Perry as a child. He was over 6 feet in middle school, and he saw sports as a vehicle for improving his life. He went to Yates High School and graduated in '93. While at Yates, he was co-captain of the basketball team, playing as a power forward. He was also on the football team as a tight end, and in 1992, his team went to the Texas State Championships. The first of his siblings to go to college, Floyd attended South Florida Community College for 2 years on his football scholarship and also played on the basketball team. He transferred to Texas A&M University, Kingsville, in 1995, where he also played basketball before dropping out. At his tallest, he was 6 feet 6 inches, though by the time of his autopsy, he was 6 feet 4 inches. Floyd returned to Houston from college in Kingsville, Texas, in 1995 and became an automotive customizer and played club basketball. Beginning in 1994, he performed as a rapper using the stage name Big Floyd in the hip-hop group Screwed Up Click. The New York Times described his deep-voiced rhymes as purposeful, delivered in a slow-motion clip about chopping blades, driving cars with oversized rims, and his 3rd Ward pride. The second rap group he was involved in was Presidential Playas, P-L-A-Y-A-S, and he worked on their album Block Party, released in 2000. An influential member of his community, Floyd was respected for his ability to relate with others in his environment based on a shared experience of hardships and setbacks, having served time in prison and living in a poverty-struck project in Houston.
14 days of testimony over the course of those 3 weeks, after a year of a racial reckoning, long overdue conversation in this country about race, justice, policing in this country.
In a video addressing the youth in his neighborhood, Floyd reminds his audience that he has his own shortcomings and flaws, and that he isn't better than anyone else, but also expresses his disdain for the violence that was taking place in the community, and advises his neighbors to put down their weapons and remember that they are loved by him and God.
Terrence Floyd, the brother of George Floyd, one member of the family who's also been out in protest
next paragraph describes 8 jail terms and the crimes for them. Completely out of character.
Has seen justice.
Sounds like. I don't know.
As we have seen these reactions, they watched along with America. That pause in between each of the charges, and now the tears as the family recognizes that jury elicited a testimony.
It's weird.
All of the charges, in this case, I remember back in Brooklyn, family gathered there almost a year ago.
Between 1997 and 2005, Floyd served 8 jail terms on various minor charges. I'm not going to read all the details. After Floyd's release, he became more involved with Resurrection Houston, a Christian church and ministry, where he mentored young men and posted anti-violence videos to social media. Donna Jean Bachmer-Landsberg is reacting. He delivered meals to senior citizens and volunteered with other projects such as the Angel by Nature Foundation, a charity founded by rapper Trey the Truth. Later, he became involved with a ministry that brought men from the 3rd Ward to Minnesota in a church work program with drug rehabilitation and job placement services. A friend of Floyd acknowledged that Floyd had made some mistakes that cost him some years of his life, but that he had been turning his life around through religion.
Absolutely, David. And you know, I walked down to Black Lives Matter Plaza a few hours before the verdict came in. It's a beautiful day in Washington, as you can see from that photograph. You look behind that photograph, that's the White House. And I couldn't help think of those moments last year when they attacked protesters, when police went after those protesters in Black Lives Matter Plaza before it was named that, and the progress that has been made. Those police officers took not to respond like that anymore, to be far more careful. There was a helicopter hovering over the protesters that night. Those helicopter crews have been disciplined in some way. But I also think about what you said at the very beginning of our coverage today, David, that it was a reckoning of race, justice, and policing, and we've talked about that so much this afternoon. But when I listened to that defense attorney, in particular yesterday, talk about Derek Chauvin and what he did during that period of time with George Floyd, he talked about George Floyd as if he was an enemy, not a citizen, an enemy.
He worked with in 2019, George Floyd worked security at the El Nuevo Rodeo Club, where police officer Derek Chauvin also worked off-duty as a security guard.
Police, said the prosecutor, is to protect with courage, to serve with compassion. And also, David, I just want to talk about that video.
In April of 2020, he contracted COVID-19, but recovered a few weeks later. So he had worked with Derek Chauvin in a... They were both security guards in the El Nuevo, the new rodeo club. El Nuevo means the new. Rodeo is rodeo, I guess. Club, the new rodeo club.
Was pulled over for some minor violation. He had both hands out the window. You could tell he was terrified. African American officer in the Army, and he was pepper sprayed. There is video of that. Thankfully, he wasn't injured beyond that. But those videos make such a powerful difference. But again, we hope that someday as a country this doesn't happen, even if there is no video.
Dr. Lettis makes an interesting point there when she talks about the defense attorney in the closing argument yesterday and his
It says after
words of George Floyd on that ground.
Floyd was unconscious and had no pulse, onlookers repeatedly called out for help. Upon realization of Floyd's struggling, Though the officers called for medical assistance, they took no action to treat him. Chauvin kept his knee on Floyd's neck and back as emergency medical technicians arrived. Shit. The family commissioned a second autopsy because the medical examiner's final findings were that Floyd's heart stopped while he was being restrained and that his death was a homicide caused by cardiopulmonary arrest, complicating law enforcement subdual, restraint, and neck compression. Fentanyl intoxication and recent methamphetamine use may have increased the likelihood of death. Other significant conditions were arteriosclerosis heart disease and hypertensive heart disease. Floyd's family commissioned a second autopsy carried out by Michael Baden, B-A-D-E-N, a pathologist and former New York chief medical examiner who had previously autopsied Eric Garner, G-A-R-N-E-R, and attended by Alicia Wilson, director of autopsy and forensic services at the University of Michigan Medical School. From the evidence available to them, which did not include a toxicology report or unspecified body samples, Baden and Wilson announced on June 1st their finding that Floyd's death was a homicide caused by asphyxia due to neck and back compression. Also, Floyd had no underlying medical problem that contributed to his death. Baden said neck compression affected blood flow to the brain, and being able to speak does not mean that someone is able to breathe. On March 12, 2021, the Minneapolis City Council approved a settlement of $27 million to the Floyd family following a wrongful death lawsuit. Eric Nelson is the attorney representing Chauvin, or who represented Chauvin, because the trial's over. Listen to this crap. One such expert made the statement that, quote, although he had him pinned down under his knee, and he's yelling, I can't breathe, there's an argument that Chauvin wasn't exerting pressure, and his inability to breathe was due to the drugs in his system, or something to that effect, or his anxiety. Okay. This is a current article. On April 20th, which is today, Chauvin was found as guilty of all charges. So it looks like, it says Floyd was buried next to his mother in Pearland, Texas. Pearland or Pearland, Pearland.
Attorney Scott Masterson, who's not present. Attorney Favani. I said Michelle. We got Michelle. All right. And it's just a great group of lawyers. And I want to let you know who we have present here with the family here in Minneapolis for this historic day. We have George Floyd's brothers. We have Philonise Floyd. We have Rodney.
A childhood friend of Floyd said that Floyd would never, quote, have imagined that this is the tragic way people would know his name, unquote. It's funny because of notable people in one of the colleges he attended, they're all basketball players, it looks like, and then there's George Floyd murdered by Chauvin. He's not listed as a basketball player, but it looks like he got basketball scholarships.
His sisters who are not with us, but we should absolutely
I don't know
acknowledge
about that.
Bridget Floyd, who hails from North Carolina, his sisters Latanya and Jaja, who hail from Houston, Texas. We have his cousins, Sharita McGee, Deidre McGee, and Tara Brown. And we have the mother of his daughter, Gianna Floyd. We have Bronson Washington, and we have Gianna.
This is interesting. On October 6, 2020, Amnesty International delivered a letter with 1 million signatures from around the world to the U.S. Attorney General William Barr to demand justice for George Floyd. Yeah. Okay. Cordell Silver's finished. So, I don't know. I mean, it sounds like George Floyd's life was a mixed bag. But whose isn't, you know? I wanted a picture of him.
He's right there talking about members of George Floyd's family. Let's listen to this for a moment.
I don't know about that.
This historical moment, not just for the legacy of George Floyd, but for the legacy of America. The legacy of trying to make America for all Americans. So that George Floyd's victory and America's quest for equal justice under the law will be intertwined. America, let's frame this moment as a moment where we finally are getting close to living up to our Declaration of Independence, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equally,
Well,
that they're endowed by their Creator with some inalienable
put it in
rights,
photos.
that amongst them are life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Well, America, that means all of us. That means black people. That means Hispanic people. That means Native people. That means Asian people. That means all of us, America. We frame this moment for all of us, not just for George Floyd. This is a victory for those who champion humanity over inhumanity. Those who champion justice over injustice. Those who champion
That's it, I
morals
guess.
over immorality. America, let's lean into this moment. And let's make sure,
It'll take some time for it.
Riverdale, that this moment will be documented for our children yet unborn as they continue on the journey to justice, knowing that the blood of George Floyd will give them a trail to find a way to a better America, a more just America, where Breonna Taylor
I don't know. There are significant things to Satanists about that information. I can't quite pin it down. I forgot. What do I have to do?
just a week ago because for some reason black men running away from the police is more dangerous than young white men who commit mass murders
Excuse me.
towards the police for an assault women. Reverend Brian like Kyle Rittenhouse in Kenosha, Wisconsin. America, let this be the precedent. Let this be the precedent where we live up to the high ideals and
Oh, ice, maybe.
when we say liberty and justice for all. The sun-kissed children
God, please protect me from evil ones. Firm, reaffirm. Firm, reaffirm. In the power of an infinite number of infinities.
Plessy v. Ferguson, Jim Crow, and his much smaller, wiser son, Jim Crow Jr. Esquire. Let this be the
Okay, I'm gonna get ice for my iced tea, and I'll be right back and upload this.
that we received today from that jury in Minneapolis is the beginning of the next equally as important chapter in American history. I want to bring in Steve Osunsami, our senior national correspondent for the Virgin's been with me all day long and for the better part of a year now. And Steve, I think, certainly as powerful as perhaps most powerful is when he talks about all of the other families who've been linked, not because they wanted to be, but who've been linked by the same kind of pain and conflict. His mother talking with her, she pretended to be George Floyd, and she said, I never intended to have this bond with these other mothers, but here I am, and we must speak. You know, it's an unfortunate club. Rachel Brooks, Sandra Bland, there are so many names now, I can't remember them all. We've been covering this for so many years, and one of the
Well,
things
who do you think is gonna be better off in the future? Or just better off now?
the pain of these families, the pain of Americans who
Dickhead.
are afraid every time they see a police officer pull up
You're an asshole. You betrayed me and Rich.
might turn south.
Your tortured children. Jesus Christ, fuck you. I'm just glad I get to be free of anything having to do with you. I'm gonna stop recording and upload this, but I'm gonna check memory first. 8.5 gigs is okay.
Steve Osunsami talking about the power of Diana Fraser's video when she captured the documents. 29 years, not only here in this country, but across the world. Mass protests, not just in the United States, but in cities really all over the world. We saw images coming out of Georgia in the aftermath of what we saw from Darnella
Satanists are totally incredulous about what's happening. They actually think they are supposed to win something.
But take a listen, David, to a little bit of this phone call that we heard the president make to the Floyd family just earlier today.
I'm going to stop recording and upload this.